morning, everyone. This is your brewer, Mr. or your teacher, Mr. Brewer. It's 6:37 in the morning. I am completing the last part of the complex numbers unit here. So the last part we need to go over, this will help you to do numbers 41 through 46 in your book, is to find complex solutions. So finding complex solutions. All right. So this is something like if you were given a quadratic and it was asking you to solve 4x squared plus 100 equals 0. We would have a hard time trying to solve this with normal methods. This looks like, so if you were to graph this, this looks like something like this. It's a parabola. It doesn't cross the axis at all, so it have non-real roots. So let's go ahead. We now have tools to be able to solve this using imaginary numbers. So I'm going to go ahead and solve. So the first thing is I'm going to move the 100, move the 100 to the other side. So move that to the other side. Okay, I'm going to divide by 4. So I get x squared equals negative 25. Next, I'm going to take the square root. We'll square root both sides. So you should get x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 25. Remember, if you take a square root, you get the plus or minus of it. And then I'm going to use the new knowledge I have of complex numbers to simplify this negative 25. So x equals, I'm going to show the steps for this, plus or minus. So I have negative 1, oops, that shouldn't be there. The square root of negative 1 times the square root of 25. Okay, so then I have plus or minus. The square root of negative 1 becomes I. The square root of 25 is 5. So if I rewrite this, I should have x equals plus or minus 5i. And that's it. You're finished with that. The answer is x equals plus or minus 5i. So now I'm going to check this and show you that it works. So I'm going to throw it into the equation. So check. So I have 4x squared plus 100 equals 0. So I'm going to throw in positive 5i. 4 times 5i squared plus 100 equals 0. Okay, well, let's look at this here. So I have 4 times, and then the 2, the square is going to distribute to the 5 and the I. So I should have 4 times 25, that's 5 squared. And then I squared, remember, is negative 1 plus 100 equals 0. So 4 times 25 is 100. 4 times negative 1, oops, not doing this correctly, sorry, I thought that was a plus. Let's do this first. 25 times negative 1 is negative 25 plus 100 equals 0. So now we have 4 times negative 25, well that's negative 100 plus 100 equals 0. Then I have 0 equals 0. Good, it works. Now let's try it with the other one. So I'm going to take my same equation up here. I'm going to plug in negative 5i into the equation. Plus 100 equals 0. Alright, so first things first. Distribute. So negative 5 squared is still just 25. I squared is going to be negative 1. Plus 100 equals 0. Really just doing the same thing twice here. So 25 times negative 1 is negative 25 plus 100. is 0. 4 times negative 25, that's negative 100, plus 100, 0. And then I have 0 equals 0. Done. Good. So x equals plus or minus 5i is a solution to 4x squared plus 100. Alright, so let's try a few more examples. So solve each equation. Solve each equation. Alright, so first one here, I'm going to do 3x squared plus 48 equals 0. Alright, I want to isolate x, so I'm going to move the 48 to the other side, so 3x squared equals negative 48. Divide by 3, x squared equals negative 16. I'll take the square root, so I have x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 16. And then I'm going to simplify this, so if you can see it, this becomes 4i. Okay, so it becomes 4i, so it's going to be the square root of negative 1 times the square root of 16. X equals plus or minus the square root of negative 1 becomes I, and the square root of 16 is 4. So it becomes plus or minus 4i. So then I can check this. I'll throw it into the equation. 3 times 4i squared plus 48 equals 0. 4 squared is 16. I squared is negative 1. So this is 16 times negative 1 times 3, so that's negative 48 plus 48 equals 0. Let me check the other solution. 3 negative 4i squared plus 48 equals 0. Same deal here. Negative 4 squared is 16 times negative 1 plus 48 is 0. So this becomes negative 48 plus 48 equals 0. Alright, good to go. So that's our answer. We'll do one more example. This time we'll do a negative. So I have negative 5x squared minus 150 equals 0. Alright, so the first thing I can do here is divide by negative 1. Or I could add the 150 to the other side. Doesn't matter in this case. I'm going to divide by negative 1 because I really just want this leading coefficient to always be positive. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I have 5x squared plus 150 equals 0. If I divide 0 by negative 1, it's still just 0. So now I can move the 150 to the other side. And then I will divide by 5. What is that? 30. And then I'll take the square root. And then I will simplify my rational number here. So this is, I'm going to break it up here, negative 1 times negative, let's see, I want to square 4. Does 4 work? No. Does 9 work? No. 16? No. Well, I guess a square doesn't really work in this case. That's okay. 6 and 5, so I'm really just left with this. So the negative 1 can be pulled out, so this will be plus or minus I root 30. Okay, and then I'll check this, so I'm going to take this answer that I have, and I'll throw it back into the equation. Negative 5 I root 30 squared minus 150 equals 0. Okay, so I have negative 5, I squared is negative 1, 30 squared is 30, minus 150 equals 0. Negative 1 times 30 is negative 30, times negative 5 is 150. So this checks out. Good. Next, I'll do the other one down here. Negative 5 times negative I root 30 squared minus 150 equals 0. So this would be negative 5 times, so I can kind of move things around here, or I can treat this negative as a negative 1. Negative 1 squared is just 1. 1 times I squared, which is negative 1, times 30 squared, which is 30, minus 150 equals 0. 1 times 30 is 30, times negative 1 is negative 30, times negative 5 is 150, minus 150 equals 0. So that checks out. All right. So go ahead and try numbers 41 through 46 in the homework. And of all the things that we've learned, this is probably the most useful skill. All right, see you later. Bye.